All right, I'm going to do some editing. I'm just going to do this by myself and chill out. You'll be hearing, don't know if you'll.
Yeah, I mean, at the time jump.
Yeah, you will. Okay. So I'm just going to do some editing. I'm not going to take questions or anything. Well, maybe I will. This is the podcast, and this is Thursday night's podcast. So what I've done so far on Discord, we have I guess it's not a bot. It is a bot, but it's some kind of utility that allows us to record off Discord, which we can't do native. Use that bot, Greg. Ask us if you want for you to. And it allows also to record on different tracks, which works most of the time. Sometimes it actually fails hard, and then throughout I'll find a different audio. But in this case, I think it's okay. I usually listen to a few of the tracks first to see like contaminant, but it's getting better. So I have all the tracks from all the people on individual tracks. That allows me to adjust their volumes or clean up their audio individually. More importantly, it allows me to clean up their conversations so they're not stepping on each other. And that just makes for a cleaner presentation, because it's one thing to be in a room and to talk and to be natural. What happens when you're not in the same exact room? Sorry, this is cyber room. Kind of all over the place, but as we're recording the show, what tends to happen is you are talking into a microphone into your own room. And it's very awkward to do that for a very long time. So if you start to really over-explain something a lot, you start to really get lost. Like you don't have reactions to go off of on people's faces. You don't hear any feedback. And I don't know if you realize, when we communicate with each other, we're really looking for signals as to how we're affecting it. Either you're looking at an audience looking for signals like yawns and heads down, or smiles and people shaking their head that they're in agreement with you. Those are signals that you feed off of. You don't have that when you're doing these podcasts. So what we do is we use a video program to put as many of our faces up as possible so that we can at least look at that and feel like we're feeding off each other as we're doing a podcast. Problem is, a lot of guests don't have video cameras or don't want video cameras. So we don't have the benefit of having everybody's face available to us. So the way of making up for that when you're talking to people that you can't see is to really give them audio feedback. It's like uh-huhs and yeah, I understand. Oh, good point. You're feeding them reassurance that you're listening, and that allows them to continue with some confidence. So what happens though when you record that and there's 4 or 5 people, sometimes there's too much of that and you need to cut that out because you want to hear what the guy's saying. You know, somebody saying, yeah, or you also, 2 people will start at the same time and talk over each other, and then you can't hear what one guy said. The guy that was talked over might have said something really funny. So what then I try to do is to go back to all the tracks and listen through them, and I tried to make editorial decisions on what was the most important point. Then I mute the guys that aren't the most important point, so that way you get one clear reference, and that's all like a judgment call. At the same time, you want to leave in some flavor so it feels like a natural conversation. You don't want to just cut bits one after another that are good. That's what I'm trying to do now.
On video, were you the one?
No, it's a Blaster H-Run.
Oh, I remember there's this fantastic,
I'll just leave in that reaction.
hilarious.
Yeah, the blaster Atron's awesome. I love that thing.
Okay, so you started out you're in Jita, you moved into small. What's the story there?
Okay, so all this I've already edited. Here's a little something that might be interesting. When I'm doing this, sure you. So sometimes you'll have like just words that don't have much meaning. They convey something. They convey connection to the conversation. Sometimes it's not that important, and so I like to clean up their language so that they sound a little more authoritative. Somebody stumbles into their statement. There's a few seconds of like, yeah, let me explain that, and then they explain it in a eloquent way. They've stumbled into their explanation and they're ready to go. It's kind of nice to cut out the beginning of that, because then what the listener hears is the question and then an authoritative response instead of the stumbling into the response. And that's what happens here. It's not too bad, but it's judgment call. Here's a question.
But then you left that corp and joined Exodus. What's the story there?
Yep. Some point in X.
So that is buying time to get his thoughts together, and that's not really necessary. So in here, what I would do, I'll go into the actual track and I'll take that silence it, just turn the volume to 0 on it. But this little confirmation I want to keep because I think that's kind of important. So I'll select it, but it's too far away. I'll select it and cut it. I'll put it right in front of his statement. Okay, so now if I go back to my multi-track, all the tracks together, you can see that the pattern has changed as well here. Let's see, the is gone. Confirmation of the question closer to the statement he's about to say. So let's second time.
But then you left that corp and joined Exodus. What's the story there?
Yep. Some point in X-Men, Silver, I don't know if you can help me remember that, but I started
The day you broke my heart.
really
Yeah.
enjoying.
Okay, so that works a little bit better. That gap of time will be at the end of this all. I let gaps live. It's totally fine because at the end of it all, I go ahead and shorten gaps. I don't delete them. I just shorten them so they're not any longer than a half a second. That allows a good rhythm. So it won't seem like it. And that maneuver you just saw me do, I did this with Silver too. Silver actually cracks that joke over here while he's talking, so you can't hear what Silver said. So then I looked and said, here's a nice gap. I took what Silver said, and that's this track here, and I moved it up a bit so that you could hear what he says, and then you could hear what the guest was saying and his laughter. So, and I think it works. I think it feels natural because the laugh comes pretty naturally and pretty close to after
Help
the
me
joke.
remember that, but I started
The day you broke my heart.
really
Yeah.
enjoying.
Now you can hear what they both said without Silver's voice being crowded out. So that's how that works. It keeps the chemistry, but cleans it up so the listener can hear it. I will actually switch in case you guys have questions. And I may not have changed the title. Probably. Skip ahead 30 seconds while I fix this up. Yeah, I have the wrong. Hello to people. I'll look at comments every because real life to do. All right, so here we are. Let's get through this. At this stage, I'm not listening to the podcast. This is not a time for me to listen to it and appreciate the content. This is me looking at it very mechanically. I'm just looking at where people talk over each other or some obvious spikes, sound and stuff. So right here, I can see there's something going on here where they're talking over each other, and that could be fine, but I have to listen to it.
You joined Exodus. Was that
that's right.
on your radar as something you wanted to do? Is that a reason for joining? I recall
The
was
AT
it 2 years ago that, yeah.
Okay, so the first part is kind of fine.
When you joined Exodus, was that
that's right.
on your radar as something you wanted? Exodus was that.
And if I'm not sure, I can actually just mute his track and listen to the post.
When you joined Exodus, was that sort of on your radar as something you wanted to do? Is that a reason for joining? I recall, is it 2 years ago that, yeah, the Alliance Tournament.
Okay. So really don't need this.
This was that
that's right.
on your radar.
Is not really, he's going to answer it anyway, so I don't need that right there. Because he'll confirm that that's true in his answer. Where it gets a little more difficult now is the host responds to what the guest confirmed. And so now I either have to take confirmation and the response to the confirmation out so that there's no evidence of any of that, or I have to make that work.
I recall
the AT
2 years ago that, yeah, the Alliance Tournament.
And this is, again, a judgment call. Do I leave it or do I take it out? Because what's going to happen is he's going to explain it next anyway. Let's see what that's like.
Yeah, I guess it was definitely something that I was interested in. I don't think it was the primary reason.
So I guess it was something I was interested in. Can answer. Let's.
Something you wanted to do? Is that a reason for joining?
And that's. So let's see.
I recall
the AT
2 years ago that, yeah, the Alliance Tournament.
Okay, so all this can go. Just mute it and take this out too. What that sounds like.
So when you joined Exodus, because you eventually became an Alliance Tournament pilot, maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit here. When you joined Exodus, was that sort of on your radar as something you wanted to do? Is that a reason for joining?
There's a question. He doesn't need any more than that. And here is the answer.
Yeah, I guess it was.
There. So I can take all this out. Even though it has personality, it's not really relevant. There's the question, there's the answer. Now, just for complete sake,
So when you joined Exodus, because you eventually became an Alliance Tournament pilot, maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit here. When you joined Exodus, was that sort of on your radar as something you wanted to do? Is that a reason for joining?
Yeah, I guess it was it was definitely something that I was interested in. I don't think it was the primary reason that I joined Exodus.
that works great. When that'll tighten up, take out. So I think the point, the content is clear, but it's not the same as the live recording. This is why we do this. Otherwise, we just take the live recording and publish it. It's so much easier. So there's a little bit of a false start.
No, we haven't.
That's an answer, so it's not a false start. So go on. There's a little gap here. It looks like it's fine. Listen to it.
The competition was so 6th and 8th.
Yeah.
In the context of the Alliance Tournament.
Works. Here they stop and they talk over each other.
And
I've never put so much work into a video game before.
Okay, and I instantly know that the host is just continuing what he's saying, so I can just knock that out. See, let's hear this.
That is pretty good.
Yeah, I think
It's the lip smack. Take those out of a courtesy.
Yeah, I think we were pretty good. we certainly put a ton of work in. That's for sure. Crazy amount of work into the AT. I've never put so much work into a video game before.
It all works together, and again, it'll tighten up. Getting the host out of there, in between there, that still all works together without him responding to them. Get the host out.
So what was... how do I want to phrase this? Back in my experience with the Alliance tournament.
All right, so there's a drop in sound, which happens, unfortunately. Can't use that. It goes nowhere. It's just debris, so we need to clear debris. The real question starts here.
In my experience with the Alliance tournament, I flew with Mercenary Code. Back in my experience...
I can start in my experience or back in my experience, but that's probably less proper, so we'll just start there.
In my experience with the Alliance tournament.
Ends up with a question.
Must have put in a lot of time.
Yeah, so we...
What's going on here?
Like a lot of alliances have the benefit of like getting 20 people out, set up.
So that, yeah, totally is not really necessary, but I want to include as much of the guest as possible. So shift time a little bit to put it right here in that silent spot to hear more of it.
Totally. Like getting 20 people.
So I just eyeball it, right? Like, oh, I need to move it centimeters. Grab it tight as I can actually go over because sometimes there's breath that fades out. So take that part out, move it forward a few centimeters, drop it. Go back to where quite enough. And this is how I try to preserve both people talking. You can see this little debris back here that I left. I would throw that out. No point in having debris. That's a little bit closer. So let's hear what that sounds like.
A lot of alliances have the benefit of like getting 20 people out.
So you can hear both of them because that pause helps out. Actually do that just a little bit more. Normally I wouldn't take this in 3 turns. Because it's too much time on this one. So I don't want it to be perfectly in here because you have to try to, over time you get a feeling for reaction times and people need to overlap a little bit. But what you're trying to do is preserve the idea of what they're saying, the clarity of the idea of what they're saying. And as long as you get that and there's overlap, it's fine. It just looks natural. So here we'll listen to that.
A lot of alliances have the benefit of getting 20 people out, set up the arena, clear off the...
Totally works. You hear both of them and there's chemistry between them. And it doesn't feel like they're on top of each other. Okay, I took more time on that than I normally would. Came along.
Just for clarification for any viewers who are unfamiliar.
So none of those confirmations. Because the host continues with it.
Did you fly any...
I don't know what he said. Couldn't hear it.
Did you fly any...
What I do is I hit this S for solo. And it mutes everything but that track, so I can listen to it.
I'm not coming back, so.
I'm not coming back, so. What I can do here is the same thing twice.
I'm not coming back, so. Actually quit the game, but I don't know. He was just like, here, you can have this now.
So he's talking about another guy that said, you can have this. I'm going to quit the game. I'm not coming back. So I can actually take this part here, move it closer to that because it's all part of the same idea. And let me look at what I just Frankenstein. Well, they're going to overlap a little bit, and that's okay because he's actually repeating himself. But let's see what that sounds like now. So I need to take this off solo.
I have this now. I'm not
Did you fly any?
No, I can't make out what he's saying, so I need to move it a little bit more forward, and then I'll deal overlap. So that's all part of the same thought process.
I have this now. I'm not coming back.
Did you?
That second one is actually more important than the first one. It breaks up. What I need to do is go in here.
I'm not coming back.
Did you?
Needed to hear that, so that's good. So he comes in a little too early, so this is easy now. I have plenty of room here. Move that up. So all I've done here is allowed him to finish his thought and the host to then begin the next thought. I've taken them off each other's back. Now you can hear, and I've also turned up the volume on the important point, which is I'm not coming back.
It's like, here, you can have this now. I'm not coming back. So
Did you fly any like AT ships or something before the Magnate, or was this just like you're jumping straight into the deep end in terms of flying?
Really, so now that I think about it, ironically.
Okay, so did he finish his question before? I'm on a Mac, by the way, and hi, Dirk.
For the Magnate, or was this just like you're jumping straight into the deep end in terms of flying?
Really, so now that
I gotta hear what he's saying because I don't know if it's important to the question yet.
Like you're jumping straight into the deep end in terms of flying expensive ships.
In terms of flying expensive ships is important detail. Careful, I can't shift this whole thing back without starting to get into trouble. There's a trick, by the way, of shifting time like that. There's a trick. You cannot delete anything or the tracks will be unsynced. Right now they're in perfect sync. So whatever I delete, I must put back, even silence. That way the tracks stay down the road exactly in the same place. So it gets tricky when more people get involved. But in here, I see I have some space, right? Like if I'm here, there's a lot of space here and a lot of space here. And I know that's Ron coming in, and he'll usually kind of comes in with almost announcing he's coming in. So you'll see right here.
Yeah.
He hasn't said anything. He's just saying, I'm coming into this conversation. And I get to know my hosts pretty well, so I know that's what's happening there. I can totally delete that. So I got plenty of room to shift everything back if I need. And that's what I'll do in this case because I think both parts are important. The host is asking, did you just jump into the deep end as far as expensive ships? That's an important point to diving into the deep end. So I want that full answer, but I want the chemistry of the coming right after it. So again, I'll eyeball it. Take the whole thing.
In terms of flying expensive ships.
That's really, so now that I think about it, ironically, I've never flown an AT ship. I went right from, regular ship.
That comes in a bit early. The thing is, people hear what you're saying, and they can't speak right after you speak because that's not natural. They need to process it. You have to have time to process what they said, and then your mind has to process what you say in return. That all takes time. Some people longer. So the point of that is, if his response is right after the comment, it's not natural. So you have to give him time to think and then talk. So even if it fits, it needs a rhythm.
I went right from,
wow.
So what's he saying wow to is important. So let's see what he's saying wow to.
That's really, so now that I think about it, ironically, I have never flown an AT ship.
Boom. That's what he's responding to. So between this moment where he finishes, I have never flown an AT ship, there needs to be enough time for Artemis, the host, to accept and react. And there is. Because this guy, the guest, keeps talking. That's okay. he's reacting not to the end of what he says, but to what he said in the middle. And that's the timing thing is kind of important. Question, where is the Matterall scarf? Hold on a second. I'll be right back. I have to shimmy in. I want that green screen right behind me. I love my scarves. I wear them to, I was going to say school. I wear them to work every day. And I've gotten other people to wear them too now. So there's a lot of us wearing scarves now. But I used to be made fun of merciless. Okay, so all this works right now. Questions asked, answers given, reaction to answer.
In terms of flying expensive ships.
That's really, so now that I think about it, ironically, I have never flown an AT ship. I went right from,
wow,
regular ships to the Gold Magnate.
It's all very natural. Sounds natural. But it's not. When it's recorded, it's a bit of a mess, as you can see. So what you hear on the podcast is actually a much better product than what you're seeing live, minus all the visuals and stuff. We've wrestled with that at Talking in Stations. We've had a lot of discussions about where do we put the show? Is the show in the visuals? Do we really focus on chat a lot and just answer chat questions all the time? And we could do that, but then all the people who are listening to the podcast are like, I'm kind of left out. On the other hand, do we ignore everything when we're doing the show, even visuals, and just make sure that we get good audios at that? Well, that's not very good for the people that actually show up. So from our perspective, what's important? If we don't have an audience, then we don't get the guests, right? The guests are only coming, they're not coming because they're my friends. They're coming because they want to talk to you guys, the fans. And the more fans they see that they're talking to, the more excited they are to be there. That's why Reddit's popular, because that's where the people are, or they think they are. Only a few thousand, really. But nobody's over at Eve Forums because they don't think anybody's there, and there actually are people there. So if people come on, there's a lot of people in Eve that won't come on a show that has like 30 people watching. It's a waste of their time, they think. So we need the live audience to attract the talent or the guest. But the real listeners, we want to cater to them because they're the 3,000 people that listen to the podcast. And they're the ones getting I think the better deal.
Yeah.
So that's not necessary.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm with you. I mean, I think that's awesome.
I mean,
I would suggest flying an AT ship, though. I would definitely suggest.
Now, you would think, well, one of the co-hosts started speaking at the same time that Ron was kind of getting up to speed on his talk. But what the thing is, when somebody doesn't finish their point, there is no point in saving that scrap because it doesn't go anywhere. So off that goes. It's just, he'll come back and make that point if it's important. And if he didn't make the point, then there's no reason to have something that's not finished in there. So that goes away. And Ron gets the floor to himself here.
I would suggest flying an AT ship, though. I would definitely suggest that.
I was going to say,
yeah, maybe I'll get around to it at some point.
Right up your alley as far as bonuses.
So now we have a pretty good collision, which I'll fix in a second. Now, here's the reason I kept this in. Just clear off this beginning because it's usually a smack. When I see a spike, it's usually a smack of some sort, and it doesn't really need to.
Yeah.
So you lean right into it anyway. And I'm leaving this whole thing because it's part of his personality, trying to lean into the talk and weigh the information and giggle about it. Because what Ron is saying to the pilot is like, yeah, you might have wanted to start with an AT ship, which is only 200 to 500 billion instead of this priceless thing that you lost. So he's kind of like, yeah, you might have wanted to practice on something super. And that all needs to be there. And it all has his rich character and his personality. So we want that all intact. It works. All we did was clear Silver off of that false start. But now Silver answers something at the same time that the guest answers. I want to usually give reference to the guest. So let me.
I was going to say the magnate was right up your alley.
Okay, that's a good point. I was going to say refers to something I deleted, so I got to cut that out now because he didn't. I mean, as far as the listener is concerned, he didn't start saying anything. I'll take that out, and that'll leave me room to then push it against the back of what he's saying. Definitely want to preserve what guests say because they're the priority. Let me shut off. So this will just be Ron, and just mute up Silver for now. This will be Ron and the guest and what they're saying.
Definitely suggest that.
Yeah, maybe I'll get around to it at some point.
That's really good timing, and I want to preserve it. I only need to fix this. Sorry, Silver.
I was going to say the magnate was right up your alley.
So good. He gave me some room because he had a word whisker, which is don't need that. And I was going to say I don't need that.
I was going to say the
it's a false the thing.
I was going to say the magnate was
a magnate.
The magnate was.
So I can.
Magnate was right up your alley.
Losing a little bit of the personality. Is kind of a. Well, that's interesting. I'll explain what happened. If you hit undo too many times, it undoes something you did back. And I don't remember what that was, so I have to redo. Taking a second to redo. But I can't leave an error like that. Create an error. It's one of the, go back out to go. Okay. Oh, I see. Amplify redid the entire thing. I do need to undo. I have to go to that track to undo. So silence the whole track.
I mean, the magnate.
I would.
Okay, so I'm back to a place where I know I was, and that reminds me, you might want to save. I actually do a high wire act when I edit. I don't save anything, and I just burn through it, publish it, and this is an interesting trick. I leave the application open, so nothing's saved because that takes a long time, and I just leave it open. And if there's an error, because I'll go and listen to it in the car, I want to hear it like you guys hear it, so I can hear if there's too much stuff on it. Then I will. Then I will come back and it will still be open. So it's a high wire act. I don't recommend it. It's not professional. We're not professional. But it's just an easy way to do it without really it taking too much time. Make sure, is the sound of this going? So it's saving tracks right now, which needs to work with all the. And I have a pretty fast computer. It's a new iMac, so it's got an SSD on it and stuff. So you can see saving these 2-hour shows or whatever take a while. Running filters on them, stuff like that. And a lot of it is compressed when I'm working with it, so it has to like kind of decompress it. I don't know, whatever. It takes a long time, so I don't like to save. But you might want to if you got to do these. Luckily, those tracks will render while I fix this.
I was going to say the magnate was
Okay, where was I? Sorry about all that. Some of the things, especially later. So what I want to do is isolate when he starts the actual set.
To say the magnate was the magnate.
The magnate is important, so the zero that. Ugh. And I'm going to leave this for personality's sake, but I need to move the whole thing over. See if the timing works. House is jam saving. House is jammed because, again, this is why I do that high wire act. A lot faster. So let's see if that works.
Definitely suggest that.
The magnate was
yeah, maybe I'll get
right up
to
your
it at some
alley as
point.
far as.
I have a troubling moment here because that is not in sync. That is a disaster. It means I may have to start all over. Depends on where the air is. Somehow Silver fell out of sync, and it happened when I undid the couple things I was doing there, and it kind of blanked out and then wiped all the volume out when I don't know, redo the silence. When I was doing all that, that was I was getting myself into a tar pit, and I've fallen in. So I have to look back and see visually if the spacing is right on what Silver is saying. Otherwise, I'll have to literally go back and restart. I'm looking at the pink, looking at track 5, the pink, see if it fits in or if it falls out of sync.
Double clicking and manual piloting.
Yeah, I mean at the time jump, Exodus was
awfully tight, but I think it was tight before, so
you know, all the beacons for the arena and everything like that. It just takes a lot of time to get all that stuff.
Yeah, and you guys are relatively small.
Seems like it works. Let's
getting 20 people out, set up the arena, clear off the wrecks, and fit the ships for.
Okay, so but we're back where we left off. And the reason is he's pulled forward. He starts talking. He's supposed to start talking when this guy answers, when the guest answers. He's pulled forward for. So I think there's a gap there. I think I can fix it. I may have to by just guessing. Go find where he talks again. Looking at the pink row, see where he comes in. And here's a good area where I might be able. I can probably back him off. This sucks, and this is one of the worst things that can happen when things out of sync. You might. All right, this used to happen before. I used to use Mumble, and Mumble was notorious for like sync. So I would have Grath yelling at somebody, and it would it would just not, after a while, not work because he is moving at a different rate than people. That was a real pain, and that's why I stopped using Mumble. Okay, so I'll just fix this, and I'll fix whatever. If he's out of sync, I'll fix him later. So in here. Back to work now. I'm pushing him back a bit.
Yeah, maybe I'll get around to it at
The
some point.
Magnate was right up your alley as far as bonuses and the way it flies.
Needs to go further back. The answer.
Yeah, maybe I'll get around to it at some point.
The Magnate was right up your alley as far as bonuses and the way it flies, right? And there are
action now comes in. And actually, it's not really a necessary, so I'll just
bonuses and the way it flies, right? And there are other AT ships that you probably would enjoy if you could get your hand.
Okay. Tighten that up. I will actually take his reaction because he asks him a question. I wouldn't. Somebody agrees, usually just a little. In reality, in business, people want you to know, the audience to know stuff. So you'll see a lot of people who are guests on shows just agreeing all the time because they're saying, I know that too. I know that too. So when somebody's talking, people will be like, I know that too. You don't need that. You presume that they know they know that. All right, I backed it up, not nearly far enough. And I do that too, by the way. I'm not throwing other hosts and stuff. It's you know, it's hard to sit up here and talk about EVE Online when you really only have this position because you have some sort of credibility. So you want to defend that credibility. And I fault myself for being a host that over explains things so that the audience can have confidence in me, that I know what I'm talking about, even though I have the experts on at the same time. And that's a bad habit that I try to get away from. If you have someone like Headliner, Asher, Jay, or Billy, those guys are experts in what they're talking about. So I just need to get out of that way. I need to get out of the way so that they can explain it. And when they say something, I shouldn't say, yeah, right. Or try to add to it. You know, that's when they get frustrated with people. And that's when they start to kick. You'll see guests kick when somebody's interrupting them just to agree. There are definitely people who do that. There are definitely guests and hosts that do that more than others. We try to omit that as much as possible. But when I do it, I can't kick myself off the show. Sometimes I wish I could. But I really have to be aware that I can't agree with them or interrupt them. I need to let them be the expert. And then I just need to all I do is try to push them off balance as much as possible so that they accidentally answer a question they didn't want to answer. That's all my goal is.
Other AT
totally.
that you probably would.
All right, so all that headache is finished. Let's hear what that sounds like now. Back out a little bit. Here comes Ron talking about probably should have practiced on a different ship before you lost the gold magnet.
And an AT ship, though. I would definitely suggest that.
Yeah, maybe I'll get around to it at some point.
The Magnate was right up your alley as far as bonuses and the way it flies, right? And there are other AT ships that you probably would enjoy if you could get your hands on some.
Sure. Right? Yeah, like Chromois, maybe. Whiptail would be.
So that was a pain, but it works out. Now that feels like it flows instead of them talking over each other. In comes the host. He has plenty of room to talk. Then we go to a guest answer, then a little exchange here, which looks fine. Sometimes I check it to make sure it's not a cough or something.
What? But it's worth noting.
Or like there, nonsensical. I don't know what he said, but it didn't convey a thought. Let's hear what the whole thing is.
a handful of fights even. It just never even, and it's an armor ship. I mean, it never even got into armor all that often.
What?
But
I don't know what that is.
But it's worth noting on your lost mail, you died to carriers. So walk us through how did this happen?
Yeah, so I don't mean to imply that I only.
Either way with this, right? It's his legitimate answer, so you might leave it in there, but he's trying to pre-answer because he feels, I can feel his, I want to explain this. Let me get in this question right. It's coming in a bit early. The question hasn't been.
Didn't happen in the novice plex. So walk us through how did this happen?
Judgment call. I'm going to take that out because I want to hear the question that he sets up, because his expression is also in the second part of the answer. So we're going to get that emotion.
Novice plex. So walk us through how did this happen?
Yeah. So I don't mean to imply.
I don't think it changes what he was feeling or how he was expressing himself. I just cut that, him trying to jump into the question too. All right, I guess I could stop here, unless you guys want to watch me do. I was actually just going to sit here and do this and not talk to you guys, but this just when the lights go on and I just can't not talk to you guys. But if you have any questions, I will answer them. Otherwise, I'm just going to work for a few minutes.
By him, and he is a
freaking awesome plan on their part.
You had been grabbing a lot of attention, though, right? How many marks you had on that ship?
Yeah. 111.
Right, so you had a hell of.
Oh, I'll just say this. You see that? That's where I can tell. I knocked his track out of sync. So I need to fix that. It's not easy to fix because I have no, except to guess. So he's coming in too hot, too fast.
Freaking awesome plan on their part.
You had been.
And the only guide I have is when I was screwing around, deleting stuff. How much did I delete? It's considerable. Let's test it. It's good. You have a tight give and take, and that's when you can actually put things back in sync, work off each other, and have some kind of
an awesome plan on their part.
Well, you had been grabbing a lot of attention, though, right? How many kill marks you had on that ship?
111.
Right, so you had a hell of a run.
I can tell by the second part of that. This right here is where the chemistry is that should be sharp.
111.
Right, so you had a.
So the reaction time from 111 kill marks on that ship to when that co-host comes back, that's the thought time there is my guide to where he should be. Problem. Okay, that's additional problem. I'll explain. Oh, it's so messed up. Let's see, how far am I? At this point, I think about scrapping it and starting over. I'm about a third. If I was any closer, I would say I'm scrap it. What I can do, what I'll do, I'm going to scrap that. At least I'll mute it, drag it down. And this is really messed up because I've got to redo whatever he was involved. But I can't trust that track anymore. There's been too much copying and editing, and something went wrong. It was in the undo process that took a bite out of that track, shortening it. So then any fixes I do to it, I have to do to that point and beyond to move the whole track backward in order to get it back into sync. And it may create more work than it's worth. At a certain point, you say, I don't really want to deal with that track anymore. Go to downloads. Remember I saved? Well, that could have screwed me too because I may have saved over the original. I think I did. Of the original. And if not, then I have to go back to the source, re-download it. And at that point, I'm really. So these are the pitfalls of editing. Editing the actual tracks, the way I edit. It's definitely a hazard. Okay, so this is what I think. Let's see. So that's something that happened when I saved over the track. If I hadn't saved over the track, I still would have had the original. All right, let me look at the questions while this thing is. Yeah, it's 9 a.m. here at this time. I'll probably be doing this for another half hour. I won't finish at this point. I've had too many errors have slowed me down. So even if I speed along, well, maybe if I speed along, I will be able to at least finish the multi-tracks. Then I have to go back and do the single track mix down. And that's not that hard. That's really more making sure that the rhythm take out a lot of the dead space. Super easy to do. Make sure that it's got good volume and it's got a lot of different parameters that make it hit a sweet spot. Car stereo, whatever. Again, that's not hard to do either. Those are all processes that this takes care of. But I will also then take off the hissing if it's too harsh. I don't want that. I don't want your ears to hurt when you're listening to it in a car. So those are the things I do after I merge all this together. Right now, I'm just getting the rhythm of the conversation down and fixing anybody's individual sound that might be. All right, so here's silver. Drag it into. Okay, and placing it is easy to fix afterwards, but I just might as well place it properly. So here's the one I think is, and I need to go to the very. What I could do, this all looks, let's zoom in. Oh, this is pretty cool, actually. So I'm looking at the green track versus this track here that's muted. So green versus magenta. Everything looks good, I'll just use this to scrub. Uh-oh, something's wrong right here. You see that? See how far off it is? So yeah, so this and everything after might be, contaminated. So a couple ways to deal with this. One is I can actually just cut this space out here. And everything shifts over, but it only shifts on this track. So the actual audio track behind it isn't touched. And that's good, except that these things get hit all the time and move around all the time. So what I try to do then, a little more dangerous, is to actually get the actual. Oh, I know. I can do that. I'm going to guess at where it should be. A marker. A marker will show up here. See, I would have guessed wrong. About there. It's getting closer. I don't know if I can put it here. In this case, you have to be super precise. So go away and can you see that wavelength? See right where the wavelength begins. You can get very precise. Distort. There's a marker, but it marks the multi-tracks, and I don't know if that to where I want it. There is it. $233. Looking down here at section. I haven't had to do this much surgery. I think I marked it where it begins. If I delete this space, again, I'll be very precise here. You can see where the sound starts down here. I'm not an audio. Not going to be that precise. That precise. Zoomed in so far. Marker go. So I deleted space out, and what this should do is make everything behind it come forward, right? And it's close. It's not.
Well, you had been grabbing a lot of attention. You created a lot of. How many Yeah, in fact, you found me doing that. You look it up, maybe I can.
Solo.
Well, you had been grabbing a lot of attention. You created a lot of. How many? Yeah, that's sort of interesting to me because you created a lot of noise between you and Wasa, and really Exodus in general, right? I mean, Maxime was flying his around before whatever happened to him.
Wasn't the recording? Artemis
no, it was not.
Hey, I'm on air.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm here. Like, the majority of what you're saying isn't coming through because you're talking pretty quietly right now, so your noise gate is too low. So we're hearing maybe like 2 to 3 words out of every sentence.
Thanks. That happened after I got my scarf?
I have no idea. I just turned on the Twitch stream and realized what was happening.
All right.
Okay, I'm going back to bed.
All right. All right. Thank you, man. That was kind of spooky. I thought, uh-oh, this show is talking back to me now. So I think I know what happened here. I think, yeah, I'm almost there. So if you want to hang out with me, that's fine. If this whole section is missing. I know what happened. I think a chunk of the audio was deleted and pushed everything forward. Yeah, so that is a problem. But we can fix that. But not as bad as I thought. It's not. This here is the same thing as this here, which means that this here was deleted accidentally, or was added in. Huh. Let's see.
Well, you had been grabbing a lot of attention, though, right? Right. So you had a hell of a run with this ship before somebody noticed, and yeah, that's sort of interesting to me. Yeah, that's sort of interesting to me.
Oh, right. Well, the top track is the original, and the bottom track is the edited. So now that makes sense to me. You guys are hearing me okay? I'm looking at the meter finally. All right, I'm going to stop for a second and answer some questions, or respond to some criticism. Okay, so I think the volume situation has been restored. It was super loud when I was playing it, I guess. All right. Mostly chat talking to one another, saying hello and what time is it over there. Okay, and so didn't really miss anything. Hello, if you're watching, I'm editing Talking in Stations podcast. Most of it was going fine. I was explaining how some of the creative editing is done. We're at a point where there was an accidental deletion of sound that has made one of the co-hosts fall out of sync, and I'm repairing that. And once I repair that, I'll get back on track. Be long, 5 minutes. That's what was deleted out, so I'm still out of sync, but now we got all the parts. And fix it by matching. This top one is a guide that I'm using. It's basically the soundtrack. The bottom one is the one that I can do is kind of zoom into this beginning here. And if I double click right on this spot, it will take me exactly on that spot on that track. So when I double click, I'm exactly on that spot and I can hit mark, and that's the marker. I'll go back out and check it, and you can see there's a marker. You can see that right under that marker for all the tracks is the marker for the single track, and that's basically more or less right at the beginning of where this talks. And so what that allows me to do then is to say I need to delete into that marker. So I'll back out. We delete all the way up to that mark. The result should be that everything is back in sync, and we're not quite in sync. You can see those two things are starting at different times. Put the scrub there. It's off by a split second, which actually I can live with, but I just want to make sure that for the rest of the tracks that they're in sync. So there's more work needs to be done back here. But I have all the same content. Those two things are equivalent. They're just not in sync. That means I got back the part that I lost, which is what threw this whole thing off. Here. Instead of, I have to do two parts here. Well, here's what I could do, actually. I'm going to mark that a little bit. Okay, so this marked with good precision. I'm going to take this soundtrack. I haven't done any sweetening on it, so it's the natural raw track, which means these guys are equivalent sound-wise. Start with part here. And I'm going to just grab that to the end. Bitter end. Copy that. It's taking a second to cut. And then I'm going to just replace everything behind here. There, and you can see there's a little bit of a shift. It was very small. Now these things are in perfect sync again. So after all that, I mean, it's 20 minutes of fixing that frickin' thing. I have confidence in my track again. Oh, to collapse this one. I can move this guy back into stable of tracks. Take the solo off so it'll start all the stuff back. Okay, and here's where our edits were. Let's hear to see how we can finish making adjustments. Looking back just to make sure everything's good, and we get to here.
Freaking awesome plan on their part.
Well, you had been grabbing a lot of attention, though, right? How many
Yeah.
kill marks you had on that ship?
111.
Right, so you had a hell of
Perfect. So you hear that lag time. This is something I've been explaining about rhythm, is people have to have a moment to hear it and then think of a response and then respond. And you're hearing that lag time. That's between when he finishes the answer and when the co-host begins his answer. That's all thinking time and talking time. You need that to sound natural.
111.
Right, so you had a hell of a run with this ship before somebody noticed and like set up a. Did you get hunted before? Like any other instance where somebody at least tried to grab you or anything like that?
Nothing. I mean, nothing that I noticed.
All that stumbling is him thinking, I don't need that. He doesn't need that. It tightens him up and makes him sound more confident if you take a lot of that out. And there's really no advantage to it. Sometimes there's some hidden chemistry in it, and you have to look for that.
To grab you or anything like that happen?
Nothing that I noticed, right? I mean, you don't know you're being hunted until someone springs the trap. There was a couple of times.
So I think we're still faithful. We're still faithful to the answer, so that's a good.
Yeah, that's sort of interesting to me because you create
a little personality from the host. I want to keep that. I mean, I shouldn't. It depends on how the host needs to be portrayed. But I can, again, if I cut, you never delete, you cut. I cut 5 seconds, let's say. I need to put 5 seconds back or things fall out of sync. I took 5 seconds out, put 5 seconds back. Everything stays in sync. And his has a little room to breathe.
Anything like that.
Oh, there's plenty of room for him to. So let's. Okay.
Moonwalk out of there or anything like that.
Yeah, that's sort of interesting to me because you created a lot of noise between you.
And second thought, that doesn't really do anything.
Exodus.
If anything, it might sound trolly if it's misinterpreted.
Around before whatever happened.
Yeah, he flew at a ton. Yep.
Right, so like Exodus was known to take their. Maxime was flying his around before whatever happened.
Yeah, he flew at a ton. Yep.
Right, so like Exodus was known to take their golden magnates out on fairly often occasion, right? So for this to be the first time somebody come up with like the perfect plan is strange to me. I figured you'd be like hunted much earlier than that.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely flying.
You hear those little, and this is terrible because it starts to lower my confidence in that track that the guest is speaking on. You hear the little blips, the stretching.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely
a little hiccup right here.
I
can't detect it in this spectrum, but I think it's these lines here that are wiggling. That's compression problem.
I was definitely flying it more aggressively than other people had. Nobody was.
It's just here that's the problem, and there's ways to heal problems like that, but generally with sound, for the most part, it's trash in, trash out. You really need a good recording. For instance, when you're on a film set, if there's a plane going off in the distance where you can barely hear it, they do not roll the camera. They will not roll a camera with any sound at all. So what they do on a film set is if they're filming inside of a house, inside of a room, they will send people to the corner of the block to stop traffic. And if there's a lawnmower going off, they will run to that house, even if it's 2 or 3 blocks away, to ask that guy, can you stop for a few minutes? And what they'll do is they'll leave a guy there on a radio, and they'll say, okay, lock it up, which means make everything quiet. And so in that little pocket of the neighborhood, they completely lock everything down. They roll sound and rolled camera. They film their scene, and then they radio out, okay, cut or whatever. And then the guy standing next to the guy in the lawnmower, a production person standing next to the lawnmower, says, "Okay, thanks." And he stays there because they're going to shoot 4 or 5 or 6 different takes. So the guy in the lawnmower has to start and stop and start and stop. And that's how sensitive they are about capturing sound. And here's the funny thing. They're capturing sound, but they're going to ask all the actors that talked to go back into a studio after the movie's been shot to do, I think it's called ADR. And it's them going into a sound booth with perfect silence to say their lines again. So the track that they're actually recording that they're being so sensitive about is for tone, for room tone, for volume, and all that kind of stuff. And then they redub the actual sound. And sometimes they just use it as a track to sync everything up. So they have perfect sound on the dialogue. And then they treat the sound with the echoes or whatever afterwards. So all that is all post-production. So the point is, if you have bad sound going in, you're going to have bad sound to work with. In this case, the compression went blurp and stretched his voice right here.
I was definitely
that little hiccup.
I
can't fix that. It would be very difficult and take way more time than I'm willing to. This stuff's all consumable, especially.
Kudos to them for pulling it off, you know.
And
So
what's
now-
funny, go ahead, Artemis.
Okay, there's a collision of hosts, right? So Artemis wants to move it on. Silver is about to say something. They collide, and then Silver says, "Oh, go ahead, Artemis, take it where you want to go." And Artemis will probably say, "No, go ahead and finish your point," because he speaks here, and then Silver speaks again. I don't know if that's what happened, but let's see.
For pulling it off, you know.
And
So
what's
now-
funny, go ahead, Artemis.
Nah, you're good. What's up?
I was going to comment on your fit too. When you died, and
All right, so I'll just take that collision away by eliminating Artemis and eliminating Silver here. And that collision is gone. And
I was going to comment on your fit too.
So I can leave that there because he's talking to the guests, so it's okay. I was going to comment on your fit. Still fits. That still fits. It makes sense. He's talking to the guests. Even though he's saying, "I was going to say," but he's doing that in different ways. And here they talk over each other. So let's see what's going on there.
Grid ever. Like,
That's absolutely right.
It's a magnate point.
Absolutely right. Yep. No, it's like a special ability. They should write it into the ship description. Like nobody warps
Right.
off from that ship. Nobody does. Like, I think I may have had.
Okay, I'm going to leave all that in. And do you know why? And this is where the director in me comes out. When you have, this takes assessing the situation. Normally, I'm just looking at this in a very technical way. Who's on top of who? How do I clean them off each other? And how do I keep the chemistry? In this case, you go into the psychology of the guests. He's just lost a magnet, which is a ship that is worth more than any other ship in EVE Online. And that can be pretty embarrassing. He lost it in a very noble way or whatever. And people give him kudos for even flying a priceless ship. But the fact is, he lost a ship, and he's trying to explain how that happened. And the hosts are pressuring him a little bit, saying, "Well, you were kind of out there with it, flying around, drumming up a lot of attention." And that's the part of this conversation. And the point is, he's a little bit on the defensive. So I'm going to give the guest as much room to laugh off and push back and kind of normalize the conversation so that it's not so tense. And that way the listener doesn't feel like the guest is being cornered either. It needs to feel friendly and cooperative so that the listener can enjoy it. If the listener is listening to a fight, the listener is going to tense up. Some people like drama and stuff, but that's not what we're about. So I want to preserve the chemistry of a give and take of like, "Hey man, we're with you on this," and that requires the laughter and the nervous laughter and the co-host coming back with a, "Yeah, sure, I can totally understand that. Let's listen to it now."
Even grid ever. Like,
That's absolutely right.
It's a magnate point.
Absolutely right. Yep. No, it's like a special ability. They should write it into the ship description. Like nobody warps off
Right.
from that ship. Nobody does.
So the host and the guest are laughing together and talking about the character's magnet, and that breaks up the tension and makes it a more cooperative experience. About time to wrap it up. All right. Daytime phones. I don't know if you guys get a bunch of calls from automated robots, but just a problem.
Pretty much most cases.
He agrees
How
with me.
many gold
But in this-
magnates are there in the game?
So
Or we're giving out?
All right, let me pull Ron back in here. See him. I can shorten these things so I can.
pretty much most cases.
How many gold
But in this-
magnates are there in the game?
I don't know what Artemis says up here, the host. Let me listen to it. It's solo mode.
But in this,
But in this, so he's starting to say something. Never finishes it, so I can't use it.
Pretty much most cases.
How many gold magnates are there in the game?
So
Or we're giving out?
I'll tell you what I think my answer was, but then, on the Eve Pulse thing where Falcon had the weird eyes,
That's kind of funny. Yeah, right here is the problem.
so
Or we're giving out?
I'll tell you what I think.
If I delete this, I knock the rest of it off sync, and you saw what happens when you do that. So I will copy or cut it out, move it forward, and paste it all back in. Remember, you take 5 seconds out, you put 5 seconds back, or you're gonna have a problem. And now this will make sense.
How many gold magnates are there in the game? Or we're giving out?
So I'll tell you what I.
You hear how he comes in pretty fast? This is what I look for too. This is when I know the rhythm's off. You put these together, they're the same concept, right? He's finishing his thought. And you want to give the guy time to be thoughtful. Still don't think that's enough time, so. Right next to each other. Okay. Let's give him enough time to be thoughtful.
How many gold magnates are there in the game? Or we're giving out?
So I'll tell you what I.
Silence, pregnant pause and all that, that's all very real in podcasting. Actually in audio design and everything. Like the silence tells you something. If I were to clip out thinking time that people need, it makes them sound smarter because they received the information and gave the answer back fast. And that's deceptive because people aren't, you're making them sound smarter than they actually are by allowing that to happen, that speed up to happen. So you want to be careful with that. And when the question, and this is again a director's perspective, when the question's an important, heavy one, you want to give it more time because you want to feel like the guy that's answering is really thinking about it before he tells you. And that's a good example of it here. He's asking him a pretty important question. How many of these priceless ships exist?
How many gold magnates are there in the game? Or we're giving out?
So I'll tell you what I think my answer was.
And because he's not sure about it, you want to give him enough time to really I think it's, I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what I think. And that all works together, that long pause. And then I'll tell you what I think is cohesive. That works together. If he knew exactly 3, you could tighten that up considerably. How many of these ships are in the game? 3. And I got one destroyed. That you can tighten that up considerably. And then it becomes a little more dramatic, in fact, because he's right on top of that. He knows exactly what he lost. And he doesn't need to think about it. He doesn't need any time to think about it. So this is where the director of the movie or the video or the audio is playing with time to convey a subtext of how smart somebody is, how on top of it they are, how contemplative they are, and you need to like feel all that out. Yeah, so whenever I have, I'll make a little joke here. Whenever I have Dirk McGurk on and I'm editing him, I'm always tightening him up to make him really smart and really, really fast. So if you think Dirk is really smart and really fast, because of the editing, and I'm just kidding because I don't edit Dirk McGurk. He is just that smart.
So moving forward, you're now going to be known as the pilot who lost his golden magnate in PvP, right? It's who you are now, at least until you lose something more expensive. Are you cool with that? Like,
yeah,
is that a reputation you're happy with having garnered?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I definitely.
Tough question from the host. He's basically saying, you know,
be flying around.
Sorry about the scrubbing. He's basically saying, like, this is what you're gonna be remembered for. Are you okay with that? And that's a tough question. You need to give the guest as much room there to like defend himself, and he does it with humor and self-depreciating, and it's all you can do, really, which is what he does.
Flying around looking for stuff.
Doing stuff on gates was your thing.
Right,
Gate guns,
right.
I don't care about those. We'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. So I just had a good time.
And you can tell he's nervous at that, even though he's laughing it off, because he's allowing people to interrupt him. And I think at that point, it's almost like allowing people to throw you floating devices so you don't drown. It's a little bit tense, you know. But I don't know if you'll notice it in the final product, but that's what's going on, I think, psychologically from listening to it here.
You said to me when you lost it, that when the game is over, and it will end at some point, all you have left is memories, right? So you got to.
And here is a nice thing that Silver does for this guest, right? Again, the guest lost an expensive ship. He's kind of laughing it off. He's allowing people to interrupt him to kind of like, you know, join him in the misery or commisery of it. And this is where Silver does a very nice thing by saying, let's put this in perspective. It's about memories. And that gives the guest something to go on, saying, yeah, that's it. Because if all this digital stuff goes away, and he'll do that in the next section, if the killboards go away, if the forums get erased, that's all gone. The only thing that you'll have is a memory, and that's more important than however much this thing was worth.
To experience something that no one else in EVE gets to experience. And aside from collecting the ship, which is a viable way of enjoying it too.
Sure.
You have a PvP experience that only others can dream of. That we can never have that. So that's really great to see.
Yeah, I had anybody who's familiar with Exodus, we're try hard, elite, whatever BS. And I had this weird experience, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. So, if you go to Zkill, you can look at like top all time. So like, top all time killers for a certain ship type or for a certain alliance or corp or whatever, right? It used to just be the top 10 and now they got like the top 100, I think it is. And I wasn't super active in the game, so I don't know what was going on. I don't know if Squiz was just having problems with Zkill or whatever, but there was a period for a couple of weeks at least where all that top all time stuff just was gone. Like you clicked on the link and for whatever reason, it just wasn't there. And it really made me think, like, man, if Squiz just like shuts down Zkill or, gets rid of that functionality that's just like sort of arbitrary scorekeeping that he has, like, did it ever even happen? Like, does it even really matter? And so, like, at some point Zkill is going to go down. At some point Eve's going to go away. And like, the only thing you're going to have is a memory of flying the ship. You're not going to be able to like show your like, look at this kill board. Your kids are going to be like, what the hell is a kill board? What does it matter? So it was just a way to have a good time is the way I look at it. And that's what I did with it.
He totally gave him an out and gave him perspective, and he took it, and he took his time with that because I think he really wanted to emphasize that it's kind of important. And I would do the exact same thing, and I agree with him. But did you hear all the little artifacts? The boop, 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 as he's talking, that's bad compression, and that's Discord not compressing very well. We have a pathway to fix that so that we can record all the sound locally and then collect it. but we run into privacy concerns with people because we don't know if that works with push to talk. So we have 3 or 4 guests and we say, look, hit this button. It's going to record on your computer. And then when I pull down the stuff from the cloud, it's going to actually pull a copy of your local recording. It won't go into your computer to do it, but it'll just copy it after the show's over. And that gives us, like, the internet is taken out of the equation for sound, because Discord is compressing the hell out of everything and making a big mess of the compression. That's what the little stretches are. They're stretched sound. They go burp, burp, burp. The problem is you have 3 or 4 people and they're like, yeah, I don't think I want you to record what, what's in my room. People talking about whatever. I don't think I want that, even though you need that. So we had a problem trying to get people to agree. It's a privacy thing. But it may work with push to talk, but we don't know if it does or doesn't.
Well, for the love of God, back up that video. Like, don't be the
Yeah.
guy that deletes all the.
And here, Ron jumps in and the hosts jump in. And what they're trying to do is basically say, what you have is valuable. Even though you lost the magnet, what you have is very valuable. It's unique. People don't know what that ship looks like, much less flies like. And it's such a historic moment. They're basically saying, like, you got something really valuable. Don't feel bad about it. And that's a nice thing that the co-hosts do for the guest. Mumble does do multi-track, but Mumble, I don't know if they fixed it, would always fall out of sync. And that is, if you saw what happened earlier today, it was falling out of sync creates so many problems. The rhythm's off, the discussion becomes completely it becomes false because people laugh too soon or too late to jokes. And so you need the syncing is critical, and Mumble hasn't been able to handle that yet. So here's another thing, and then maybe I'll wrap it up.
I don't know if I'm ever going to share it with the public, but I have it back.
No. Let's talk about this for a little bit, because aside from Eve, you create other content. You're a pretty good video editor too, right? Did you not win?
So they're moving on to video editing and stuff like that. There's a little bit of give and take here.
So why can't we see a Jalop video of you flying this thing? Maybe not the death part, but I know you have footage of sick 1v1.
So I was actually making.
Okay, so no point in him coming in this early because he never gets in. Oops, I hit marker instead of put a hotkey for silence. So let's listen to this part again without the interruption.
Maybe not the death part, but I know you have footage of sick 1v1.
So I was actually making.
And I do, and him coming in early is fine.
Who knows?
Don't deny me that footage.
Chemistry we'll leave in. He's laughing together. They're all laughing because the tension is lifting from basically having to remind the guy that he's screwed up.
Oh yeah, that was one.
There's Artemis, all right, saying he wants to move on. That's his way of starting in. But if these guys are finishing, I'll let them finish. A little more chemistry here.
I show that to my guys to get them amped up for Fleet now.
Take the
Fleet now.
You're in that one.
I know, right at the end. I hear it. And my friend Duke laughing over me. I remember.
Yep. Yeah. Good times.
Nice. You see how that ends? And I'm really happy with the co-hosts here. Really kind of gave the guy room to like feel better about it. You have to ask the hard questions, and then you get that levity afterward. So they go into a second section, which I won't do today. I will do it today, but I'll do it tonight by myself and move a lot faster. So explaining things. So move into the second part of the show. You can see there's a long introduction to that part by Artemis. And so what I do is I change tracks now because this guy is now the primary guest. This guy who was in the first section isn't, so I'll move him to the bottom. It just allows me to work with less space here now. See the tracks that I kind of... Oh, he does come back. So how much more do I got? About half. Again, once I do all this, I merge it into one track and then I sweeten it. And then once I sweeten the track, then I attach music, fade ins, fade outs, fade envelopes, I think they're called. And then from there, I publish. And once it's published, then I put it on the website, talkingstations.com. And then I have to do all the write up and stuff. And then I have to create the artwork. And I can show you all that, but it's just not going to happen before I have to run to work. Could probably stay another 45 minutes, but can't imagine anyone's. How many people are here? 17. I can't imagine you guys are still interested in watching this process. You know what I'll do though? Why don't I skip to the second? I'll make the artwork for this. Why don't I do that? And that way it's a little more interesting. I'll turn on Photoshop real quick. Normally I do the artwork in like literally do the artwork in 5 to 10 minutes tops, and it's an afterthought. It's usually the very, very, very last thing to, like, everything's done and then the artwork is done. But McLeod's in here. McLeod does a lot too. Let me just say hi to some people. With simulation. All right. Well, I could actually keep going for another 45 minutes, but I just feel like this is kind of boring. Oh, why don't I do this? I'll work quietly for the next 10 minutes. If I can finish, then I'll do the Photoshop and then I'll call it a day. Because I want to merge down and show you how I sweeten it too. And then I think I can finish that in 45 minutes. See if I can do that.
Or am I reading it? Yeah, the explosion velocity has been decreased. So
That's right. That's pretty hard.
So basically, fighter application nerfed pretty substantially across the board.
That's pretty hard.
And then
That's right. No, you're right.
Happy.
But Pred, did you think?
Once means I'm not wrong.
No, you're right.
Happy.
But Pred, did you? Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. Them.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. Probably would have tanked them.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah.
I mean, hang on. I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second here. You were outnumbered, and they were in carriers, and you were tanking them. That seems we're tanking them.
Yeah.
That seems fine. Carriers, and you were tanking them.
Yeah.
That seems fine to me.
You would think so, but
except that Pred, they're so oppressive, right? Like Snuff can wield them, and what are you gonna do about it against Snuff?
as far as carriers,
this would just make it a ton easier.
Yeah, it's kind of like when
that guy, I gotta fix his track. His track is hissy. It's hiss.
No, for PvE, I would still think it would still be used as long.
It's very harsh. What we do with harshness is S's are usually what it's called. It's the semblance. It's called semblance. And semblance is it hurts your ears. It's at such a high, harsh pitch. You need to amp that down. So there's something called a de-esser, usually on the S's.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a.
It doesn't say S in there. We'll hear it mostly. But his whole thing is like way hot. So what you can do with this, it's an effect. There's a few ways to deal with this. The first and easiest way is I just use a de-esser just to kind of take the harshness out. And what that does is it takes a certain band. So these are the lows. The lower you go, the closer to 0 you go. The higher you go, the higher you go on a scale. And this is a different way of looking at a scale. So what you'll hear is, with the filter on, this is the green light for the filter, is to a point where he talks.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a. Yeah, I definitely think it's a
very small difference, and I can't really even tell unless I'll go ahead and loop that. Here's a loop to toggle it, so it just keeps playing over and over and over again, so I can listen to the difference. This is the range it's knocking out, and I can basically invert it so I can just hear the part it's knocking out and listen to it. And if I hear anything, I know it's knocking something out.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a. 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 Yeah, I definitely think it's a.
And then I can change this adjustment to do like, oh, this is for a male voice. Let's see what that's like. Okay, well, that's my default. So de-esser is a different range. It's a bigger range. I'll see what that sounds like.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a. Yeah, I definitely think it's a. Yeah, I definitely.
That's how much sound it's knocking out. So yeah, that's a lot of sound, which means he has a lot of stuff in that range that hurts your ears. Hi-hat bleed is a drum thing. So a lot of this is meant for music. So again, what I do is I do a male voice de-esser, not escher, because esser is a smaller range. And
I think it's a. Yeah, I definitely think it's a. Yeah, I definitely think it's a. Yeah, I definitely.
That's with it on.
I think it's a. Yeah, I definitely think it's a. Yeah.
Is off.
I definitely think it's a. Yeah, I definitely think it's a. Yeah, I definitely.
I actually hear the difference. It might be these headphones, but I do hear it. So what I do is, and this is just the principal part, is I'll go ahead and apply that filter to the whole thing. Take a little bit, but not much. And what I get from this is I have a little more confidence that it's not going to be harsh on your ears. Just a little bit more confidence. And this depends on people's mics. Little mics create a lot more semblance. Yeah, if you heard the difference, that's great. It was a very, very slight difference, but a little bit of that harshness is now gone. And I know this from working in art for many, many years, that real subtle change is the difference. Just like Eve, whenever you stack in, you're stacking, you're not stacking penalties, but you're stacking stats, basically. Every little bit counts until everything taken together gives you an advantage. And that's the same way with sound and the same way with Photoshop, which I'll show you in a while. Every single little thing that you do will add up eventually to a completely different sound. And you don't even realize it when you're working on it until you go and look at a before and after. Then you're like, what a huge difference. But it was just little changes. And the best artists work in very subtle ways. You almost, when they're brushing, you almost don't see any color being applied. It's like at 2 or 3%. and that allows them to paint over and over and over again to, well, I don't want to go into it. Maybe I'll show you that one in Photoshop. So there's a very small difference. The bigger difference, because this guy is going to need a lot of work here.
Yes and no. For PvE,
Still a lot of high on there. So for this guy, I may go into filter and EQ and do like, there's lots of different filters. They all work in different ways, but they achieve there's many ways to achieve a certain thing. So it's really kind of what you're familiar with and what works for you. Lately, I've been doing a lot of the FFT filter. I don't actually know. What I'm going to show you now, if you can see it, and I don't think I can grow it, so but it doesn't do anything. You're going to see the sound waves jumping up and down, and this is the range. Again, this is the low range down here. I have this set to knock out subharmonic bass, so that when you're listening to it on your car radio, you don't get the the rumble. This is eliminating that. That's why it's set there and custom. I did earlier for a different. I usually do that at the end when sometimes Artemis will get a lot of bass, and that's because the reflection of the room is too tight on his mic and he's getting multiple sounds hitting it at the same time. So anyway, way too much information for what I'm explaining here. What you're going to see is you're going to see the sound waves going. So let's look at that. First, let me trap this sound.
yes and no. For PvE,
The majority of the sound is in the middle.
Would still think it would still be used as long as you're paying attention on local, you're watching your.
And that's where it should be, right? Because our voices are in a certain mid tone. Whenever you listen to music, the voice track's usually in the mid tone. The high track, that high area up here is cymbals and different parts of music, and the lows are the drums and different kinds of music. But usually you have a voice track, it's usually in the middle. I'm a little out of my depth. I'm not a music producer, so I don't know if that's exactly the way it is, but generally the middle tones is where you want the voice. That's why when you buy a stereo, by the way, and they're like, this is a great stereo, listen to it, and all you hear is the highs and the lows and the mids are kind of weak, it's because the way that music is made these days, for most people, they want to hear the bass and they want to hear all the little things at the top. That's like what feels like a big expanse. I listen to, not to be a dick or anything, I listen to jazz, and I usually like vocal jazz, right? Like people who are singing. So I like to hear the voice. And that's usually in the middle. So whenever I go to a shop and they're like, yeah, here's a great stereo. Can you hear like how nice it is? And I think it sounds terrible. I can't hear the voice. All I hear is the bass and the, wangy things. So yeah, so a lot of times I can't find the stereo I like. I love crooners. It might be just we Mexicans love crooners. That's why we like Morrissey so much. All right, I've made some stuff here, but in this case, I have. Oh, let me get the de-esser. There's the de-esser. So let's see what that does.
D-scan, like you'll know when someone's trying to hunt you. As far as PvP goes, yes and no. If you're like a small gang carrier group that's going around
with it, here's with it off. Here's what it sounds like normally.
Yes and no. For PvE, I would still think it would still be used.
Here's with it on.
Yes and no. For PvE, I would still think it would still be used as long as you're paying attention on local.
That's a big difference to me. And that'll help you not grimace when you're. I've heard podcasts that don't do nearly as much as I'm doing now, and I literally sometimes can't listen to them because they hurt my ears. So I'll apply that. It may take a little quality out, but I'm willing to sacrifice some quality for a nicer experience. As long as you can understand what he's saying and it doesn't hurt your ears, I'm okay with that if you don't hear the tinniness of his voice. And normally I don't really correct sound until after I do the edits because I'm usually just visually editing rather than listening to it. I'm listening to it so you guys can hear the difference. That's why we're stopping and starting. But in this case, I don't want to hear that voice. It's going to hurt my ears. So I'm going to deal with this now. That way when I edit, I don't have to listen to that. And this will be all I'll do now. There's other ways to deal with this, but those are the two that... So de-esser takes away that harshness.
I definitely think it's a good change. I mean, I know hunting level 5 carriers can be like...
It's much better. I don't know if you can hear it, but I certainly can. All right.
Yeah, it's kind of like when...
Cool. So really quickly, the
one
change
last
that
question on
we-
NSA. Do you
Poor Artemis. Can't move it along. All right, all this looks... Oh. Little collision here.
I think they
That
just
is a
specified
fantastic
warping, wasn't it?
question.
What? Say what? What did they say?
Specified warping.
Hear what he said.
I think they just specified warping, wasn't it?
I think they just said warping. They didn't really specify.
I think they
That
just
is a
specified
fantastic
warping, wasn't it?
question.
There's no room for this, even though he says that's a fantastic question. One of the guests asks a question, and the other guest answers it. Artemis is like, that's a good question. It's not necessary, so I have to delete it. And I can't get that chemistry right because the guest answers after the first guest asks, and so to fit it in would be a problem. Not going to waste time with it. What I'm looking at is spacing. I see that these guys have clear breaks, and this guy is able to talk, and mostly here, but there's a little collision here. Talk over each other.
like
Kind of a
why do they
question.
need them?
So it's kind of multi-purpose.
Why do you need them is the question, and I don't think he says any. Let's see.
Kind of a tough question.
It's a description of, he says, kind of a good question. It's not even good audio, so I'll just mute that, and it sounds more natural.
Like why do they need them?
So it's kind of multi-purpose.
Better listening.
Stack, which I think is what I'm hearing from Pred as well.
Pretty much, yeah.
I completely agree with that.
That you guys said.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Papa Rob.
No.
I think that's good. They're laughing together, and that goes to chemistry. All the tracks now. See them all vertically. What's going on here?
So, you know,
So,
I
Ron,
think you should be able to apply damage. Yeah.
there's a tutorial actually that CCP made.
Ron answers, the co-host answers the host, so I kind of need to leave that there. And I don't want to mess with the timing there, even though they talk over each other. Pause. You need that thinking time. Sounds unnecessary.
If you're Titan, then suddenly that
Jalop.
single destroyer isn't a problem.
Probably a joke.
We're going to continue on. Thank you for your feedback, though.
This may not be the tightest show because I'm not listening to. I think if I remember correctly, I watched a little bit of the show, not all of it, but some of it. There was a lot of start and stop, and
To help you
Yeah,
get
I
out of
mean-
trouble when you get stuck.
all I'm going to do is clean up when people make sounds that don't really.
But, you know, like, I mean,
I did when I was
But
moving it for sure.
no, it's
in the vein
Jalop,
of more
are
risk,
you-
right?
All this stuff I can zero out. It's little clips of bips. Careful though, sometimes somebody's saying, uh-huh. This part comes in a little. Now listen to this. That's just background noise. Doesn't act. So now all these guys are spread
Good
out.
change, honestly.
I agree. I love the change.
In the vein of more risk.
Jalop,
Right?
are you worried that this is going to mean?
I have to fix this. So this is actual editing. He says, Jalop, are you? And stops. Starts again. So.
Are you worried that this is going to?
No point in this are you. And this is tricky because I can't delete anything. If I delete, I knock everything out of sync. So I cut, paste, hole. You can fix this in a different way, but let's see if it works this way.
In the vein of more risk, right?
Jalop, are you worried that this is going to mean fewer juicy targets out there for you?
You know what's funny is cutting that speed there made Artemis sound a little bit rude because he asks the next question right after his co-host asks a question or finishes a comment, and it's almost like he's ignoring the comment. But with more space, it feels a little more respectful.
In the vein of more risk, right?
Jalop, are you worried that this is going to mean fewer juicy targets out there for you?
I pretty much.
That just seems a little less dismissive.
Like that guy that killed your magnate. I used to chase Jalop.
All these little bits are just people trying to talk and cut off, so they and it's cleaning those.
It won't have a significant impact.
When you're live, it's hard to know, especially when you're on camera, when to talk and when not.
The majority of the
these little spikes, I can usually tell they're lip smacks of some sort.
Not complaining.
Yeah.
Pred, did you ever run the VNI?
Yeah.
Pred, did you ever?
He tries to get in, doesn't work.
Not complaining.
Pred, did you ever run the VNI fleets in LoSec? I think I remember fighting you guys in the mods.
We did when our corporation.
He's starting early. That out.
Or ancillary armor rep.
Yeah.
And then it would just kind of try to cut you down with drones with like some fleet support with it.
So this wouldn't necessarily.
I like when guests are intermingling because it feels more cooperative.
Yeah, I definitely think the medium beam laser changes are going to be a benefit.
What about Gila?
We can't talk about the Gila.
Okay, so that's what's next. So I got question.
What about Gila?
We can't talk about the Gila.
Gotta talk about the
What?
Gila because I think that's a pretty.
Just cleaning it up.
Gotta talk about the
What?
Gila because I think that's a pretty big chop on the PvP.
So,
yes, for sure.
So the Gila comp is actually
Cleaning it up so that you get a little clarity.
Gotta talk about the
What?
Gila because I think that's a pretty big chop on the PvP.
Yes, for sure.
So the Gila comp is actually one of my main core.
And then instead of them falling over each other, it feels like they're just kind of working off each other. Here, everybody jumps in on Ron. Let's see.
Let's adjust the cockpit size and color on the left wing. And
Finds all laughter.
The fleet around the grid.
Sure. I think Artemis brought up that it's mostly done with bombers, right? So what Artemis brought up earlier before the
Ron does that agreeing thing a lot. So believe part of it is.
And that, but
Sure.
I mean, I was.
S does that. Remember, when one person confirms when another person's talking, they're trying to say, I know that too, I know that too. And you just need to clear that out without making them look less authoritative.
And then when Welcanes got nerfed, like people went to Drakes and you would just have the massive missile spam. It's just
That's right.
None of what Ron is saying there adds to it. It just lets people know that he knows that too.
Too terribly long ago.
Yes, it did. It was lost.
Nobody else starts anything. The host takes back.
Bro, kill.
Right.
So for us, we always kind of have this back and forth.
I can take that out. It just shows a delay. And that sounds a little more confident, right? Finish the point, and then the guy comes in solid.
Warp to 0. Kill.
We always kind of have this back and forth debate.
That, when it gets tightened, will sound really good. Trust me.
That it's going to get now. Like you can hit up to 80 with B.
Yeah, I think the Harvey is.
Well, no, it's not too.
Take out whatever say because.
Is it just too short a range for you, Jaleb?
Well, no, it's not too short. It's one. Would be. It's certainly looking more attractive.
Talking about there to you guys.
So the
never even heard of those ships.
I was going to say, really.
So the Abaddon buff, I think that's more into relation of how cheap the Balg.
I was going to say, really.
So the Abaddon buff, I think that's more into relation.
I mean, you could use a Balgorn. I still don't. Battleships in general are in a bad. I think T1 battleships in general.
Oh, definitely.
Well, Baltec fleet is still used.
I think T1 battleships in general are in a bad spot, right? I mean.
Oh, definitely.
Well, Baltec fleet is still used regularly.
I hate this.
If they stumble on each other, and the problem with that is that the one guy has a false start because of it. He's trying to figure out if he should stop talking or let the other talk. So this guy is going to have a stumbly beginning, even though I've silenced the other guy stumbling on top of him.
Did you guys did you hear that? Did you hear that like way off in the?
So I need to clip off that bad part. So this will now start with.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that like way off in the distance? It's like a million crabs clacking away suddenly.
His joke is
ever, and I think that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I've seen combat oracles. Sure. Yeah.
Buren does it on stream.
Saying the same thing, so.
Yeah, I've seen combat oracles. Sure. Yeah.
Buren does it on stream.
Get to say what they want.
I kind of agree with the drones, but
I'll start by
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. Or the big boys will just put more oracles out. That's my opinion.
Well, so
Almost done. Taking a little.
Yeah,
about you, Chad?
I feel exactly the same.
How
Yeah,
about you, Chad?
I feel exactly.
See what he's.
How about you, Chad?
He's swinging it over. Necessary, but it shows good form, so need to make it more. Take it solo.
It's too much.
How about you, Chad?
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I mean, I feel exactly the same way. I mean,
Now it sounds more confident, and everybody gets to talk.
It's too much.
How about you, Chad?
I feel exactly the same way. I mean,
Comes in a little soon, but
Is anything we missed? Anything worth continuing on?
Saves me having to move from.
You're just gonna
Well-
like take.
Sure, I mean, why not?
of course, yeah. More risk sinks are a good thing.
hear that pop? That
So
pop.
that you
is,
reduce.
that pop is when you talk directly into your mic. I think you can see my mic has a pop guard. This is a little screen, and it's made out of aluminum. And when I talk directly into my, and this is a windscreen too, which you don't need indoors, but I just left it on there to protect it from dust. This microphone is a shotgun mic. It's long. It's like this long, thin. That is very directional. You probably not hear me very well, as opposed to now you can hear me much better because it's very directional. It has a cone. I need to be in that cone. Let me put my, yeah, it's a cone and I need to be in that cone. So this pop guard here protects the microphone sensitivity from air hitting it. Because if air hits it, you'll hear a pop. And that's what you hear. It's here.
Of course, yeah.
Hear that? That's really just air hitting the mic. It's very sensitive. So that's why people have these black things in front of their mics, because what that does is it absorbs the shock of the air so that it doesn't hit the mic. It disperses it. And this has 1,000 little holes in it, so the air coming at it hits it and gets cheese grated through it and dispersed. And that's what pop guard is. And pop guard is when it's the puff of the air hitting it, and you'll hear that sometimes erupt. So you're talking right into a mic, you're doing it wrong, unless there's a pop guard there to protect it. You need to talk at least with shotgun mics too, 45 degrees off it. So it's here and you're talking like this, you're slicing through it. And that way the air travels past the microphone, but all the sound is collected. I think that's one way of explaining. And so those hurt your ears when you're listening to them. You'll see right here.
I mean, why not?
Of course, yeah. Core.
You can fix these. Don't want to fix this one. If it was important, I would.
Of course, yeah. More risk.
These little things are mouse clicks. You see this little guy right here? Zoom in. I can always tell that's a mouse click before someone talks.
More risk.
That's a tiny one. Sometimes they get really loud, and they annoy the heck out of me. So when you listen to it, you don't need to hear the mouse clicks or the keyboard.
Well, that and you reduce the job of like trying to go get a. That's the killer job to have to do.
Yep.
But what about all?
I don't know if you heard that, but that little snap at the end.
Yep.
It was at the beginning, actually. There's an easy way to fix that. I saw this thanks to Dunk Dinkle. This is the last thing I'll show because I'm almost done. Let me back out a little bit. Right. There it is. You see that? That's up. Bzzzt. That little bzzzt, we can fix that. That cracks me up. So I saw this because I saw somebody at NBC who does a lot of the all the brand, like the little commercials about the shows they're going to have later on that night. I was able to tour there, talk with some of the technicians, and what they do here is they actually take this and they draw. Do I have the drawing tool? Two ways. There's many ways to fix things, but I don't think this is it. Yeah, this is a selection page. They have more sophisticated equipment than I have, but they literally will draw the sound wave in to get rid of those zaps. Here I can heal it, I think. So here's a healing brush. It's here, yeah, here's the brush. Let's see if I can see the actual zap. Back out a little bit more. I think it's right up here. You see that cloud? That's in the highs. Because again, the low is the bass, so that yellow is the bass down here. And this is about the mid voice, and it's a whole spectrum of sound. But up here you have a burst of information up here in the top, which is high. So I think that's what that is, and we'll just find out if that is it. So what I'll do is I'll select that area so that I don't really mess up more. There's the area. I've selected it. Let me go to effects, and I'll just do an auto heal selection. This does all kinds of calculations, and you see it made it disappear. So now we'll hear that zap again, and we'll see if it's still there.
Yep.
On. So.
Yep.
Here it is. I just put it back.
Yep.
My computer is chugging because I'm streaming. So this is with it. The snap. Sorry about that, guys. Select it for elimination. I will listen to that same spot. Much better. Maybe you didn't notice it, but I do, and your car stereo might.
Yep. Yep.
He agrees with me. It'll sound like a pop.
Yep.
So we
But
got
what
rid of
about
that.
all those poor market seeders who seeded markets with the skill box?
I know. I mean,
Okay, so now they're getting to the end because they're starting to make.
Get rid of all this silliness.
Make less a job for those guys, right? I want to fly ships. Make less a job.
Comes in too early, and I don't. I can't navigate it. I'll just push him back to come in a bit.
Just get rid of all this
Yeah,
silliness.
make Eve less a job.
Just get rid of all this silliness.
Make Eve less a job.
So I'll move. Spreading these guys out so they can say what they say.
Just get rid of all this silliness.
Make Eve less a job for those guys, right?
Hear how that kind of stumbles in because it's too quiet. It's like a, and I can see it visually. The smaller entities are lower volume.
Yeah, make Eve less a job.
So make, I eliminated that one, but
make Eve less a job. Make.
What I would normally do is cut this make and put it here, put those together, and that would work better. But I don't want to do that in a multi-track because I knock things off sync. So instead what I'll do is just raise the volume on this. I've silenced the first make. Second one got louder.
Get rid of all this silliness.
Make Eve less a job for those guys.
Not perfect, but in the end, there'll probably be music going in the back.
Any shout-outs for us today? I do have a question for you. Are they even on the scale?
Is it on the list?
Dude, that's like,
All good. They're all laughing. It's history. We'll keep it. Get to the end here. A little something going on.
so the
Get rid of that.
Begging me to do one for him.
You hear that? Whew. That's air. That's a poof. He hit the mic with too much air. And that, in this case, I don't need to save it because there's nothing, no sound behind it. So
Me to do one for him.
just eliminate.
All right. Silver?
Then he goes into his ending right.
Out with sound on to end the show. Needing a fix for your Eve podcasts, I would highly recommend that. Get my shill in. Watching this update, we'll let the ad play out with sound on to end the show. Fantastic. And while that ad plays for those watching the video, my shout out goes to, I should mention before, in 2 weeks, you'll be able to find the full schedule and everything on the TIS Discord, or you can just follow. As a result of this, there's going to be a lack of Talking in Station's regular content. Levitain, who are my co-hosts over there. So I want to shout out to those. So if you're needing a fix for your Eve podcasts, I would highly recommend that. Get my shill in. We'll let the ad play out with sound on to end the show.
And that's actually not a good ending, because it's good for the video, which is what he was in mind frame of. It's like, oh, we're just going to drift away with this commercial sound that's coming through. Good night. But there's no good night. So when the podcast ends, he's actually throwing it to something that the podcast doesn't have. Podcast has music. And so when we end the shows, we like to end it with, see you next week, and then boom, you go off into the distance with the sound. We don't have that moment of, we're done, goodbye. We have
the ad play out with sound on to end the show.
That's it. And that is not good enough. So what I can do is steal it from another show and put it there if I really wanted it.
All right. And that'll do it for this episode of Talking in Stations.
Oh, there it is. It's over here. And I don't know why it's way over there.
I'm going to move us to public.
Good. And that's after show. So I can leave that there. Pause. It'll show up in the mix. There won't be anything between it. Okay, we're done. We're done with the first phase. So all this goes and export this. Put it down somewhere. And what I want to do when I do this is, there's two things going to happen. One is I'm going to make sure that the compression is not compressed. Like I don't want to compress this. I need it to be as raw form because I will compress it later. And I don't want compression and then recompression. So first thing is I just check the name to make sure I can find it later, and I can all the episodes. So I'll hit save there. And now it wants to save. It wants to ask me how I want to save it. I don't want an MP3 at this point. That's compressed. I want a waveform that's uncompressed. You can see it here, wave uncompressed. I'm moving from a 48 hertz to a 48 to a 41, which is okay because that's where I want to end up anyway. And if I were to work in 41 here, it would have to convert all my tracks to 41, and that takes a long time. So I skip that, make everything 48, and then convert it to 41. I don't know if you guys need to know that stuff, but it takes a second. Oh, the FFT filter. Actually, McLeod is better at this than I am, so I should probably have him doing this. But he can probably explain what a lot of the things are. I just know from experience what I want to use to do something, and reading about it and doing what you guys do, just figuring it out. And some of you might be sound editors, so if you guys want to write what the things are in chat and stuff like that, that's totally welcome. I am not a professional sound editor. I've only picked up what I know from the stuff that I know from film, but also doing these podcasts for 4 years now. By the way, I've been looking for new podcasts, and there's some really good podcasts out there. It don't have anything to do with Eve. But I'm just, I'm blown away by the podcast medium right now. I think it's really, mobile devices come to a point where the mobile device and unlimited streaming together have really made media consumption so different. So different. Literally, I bought the bigger iPhone so that I had a little bit of a bigger portable screen. And if I go to lunch at a cafe, I can, with my headphones, and I have the little ones, these, which are fantastic. I think they're going to come out with a new version in a few days. I don't think you can buy them in LA anymore. They're actually on back order. You can't even get them at the factory. But these little AirPods with a big iPhone, it's like a little theater traveling with you wherever you go. So at lunchtime, I can literally watch Netflix because it's unlimited download with those little, little earbuds while I'm having lunch without getting tangled up in that combination it's just changed things in a significant way. Okay. So here's the track, and what I do now, this is the scary part, but it has to happen, is I close all these files without saving. So all this work, everything I've done, I'm not saving it. So no to all. Because I've got all that into one track now, and I'm going to live or die by that track. If I need to fix something, I have to fix it on that one track. And so now I'll bring up the template that is Talking in Stations. And this will come in with the music and just a few tracks. And it'll probably come in with yesterday's show. So get rid of that. And now I need to go find the soundtrack that I just did, the voice tracks. All I did was the voice track. Here it is. And so here's my intro music. You can see a little green there, and the outro music, and it's the same music. These are soundtracks, but I've cut them out now because people didn't like hearing sound. But I had station sounds and music, and I was starting to get into that, which I kind of liked because it makes the podcast more of an experience. But because we tighten everything up and it's really just concentrated content, you don't need that filler. And I thought that was a good point. So here's our voice track. You can see it now all together. Those are all the voices together. And there's a marker there. Now, I leave myself markers for a reason. That means I need to manually fix this when I get to it. So I'll come and investigate what that marker's about. And what that means is there's mistiming there that won't work if I let the computer do it. So I have to manually do this. Visualization of Warfare Change and EVE Online. Both March 20th. That's the wrong one. The one I need is this one here. That was Sunday. This is today. Yeah, and that looks more correct because you can see huge gaps, right? Where I eliminated stuff. You see big old gaps of 5-6 seconds. Those will all get dealt with right now. And I'm looking and I don't see any gaps that I need to deal with first. I thought there was one, but maybe something.
and with Aurora, before the bonus that it's going to get now, like you
Yeah.
can hit up to 80 with beams.
That is this little thing here. Sorry about that sound. Psst. At this point, I could fix it. You see the disturbance in the force right there? Now the problem is when you do it on this track, it may actually make it sound different since there's a voice.
Now.
And it worked fine. Oops. Everything else looks good. It should, because I did all that, a lot of the cleaning up and stuff. The problem is that it's the rhythm's off because I've taken out big chunks. So that's the first thing I'll do. The way I do that is through diagnostics. And so I will, once I'm in it, and I am in it here, I'll just go ahead and what you're normally supposed to do is find levels so it determines what silence is so that it can eliminate it. But I've already got it, kind of have it toned. So I'll just scan. This doesn't take very long, although it says it will, it does. And it's going through and I've set criteria. I've said if you're longer than 600th of a second, that's a little more than half a second. If you're longer than that, I want you flagged, that space. And then what you can do is delete that space or you can shorten it. And I always choose to shorten. And so anything over longer than half a second, I will shorten to half a second. So now it's found all these results here. And it's literally hundreds. Well, could be hundreds. It's just a lot of different places where it's more than half a second. So I'll hit delete all. And you'll see we're at duration here. I can't check right now. It's a complicated process, so I want to let it do its thing. If I mess with it, it'll make it take longer. But everything now that's longer than half a second will get truncated out. So you see these gaps over on the right here? They'll be gone. If you look up here at the whole thing, the view of the entire soundtrack, there's a huge gap at the end. That'll be gone. So right now I'm taking out gaps, and let me read some notes while I do. It's here, so it tells me when it's done. Is there a way to save the multi-tracks? Yeah, you can nest tracks into tracks. Again, I'm working on two concepts. One is this is something I need to get through pretty fast. So there's a lot of things I don't do. This is not the best way to do things, and certainly not the most secure way of doing things. I'm taking a lot of shortcuts that can cost time if you screw up. But this podcast will be consumed because it's not very evergreen, right? We really talk a lot about this is going on in Eve today. So if you listen to this a year from now, chances are there's not much evergreen in it. This episode actually does have the killing of that magnet you'll want to hear that even in 3 years. But all the new stuff and the changes coming to the game have no need for that after a few months. So because we're kind of a temporal podcast, it gives us our relevancy, so that's a plus, but it also makes us kind of wither on the vine. That's the minus. You won't need this information after a few months, so I won't take a longer production process to ensure how things work. Because once I get past a certain point, I essentially, like I said, I just delete stuff, let it go, because I won't go back. And if it's still broken going forward, I'll have to deal with it a different way. But I won't go back and refix somebody's voice. It's 3 or 4 steps back because I don't want to do all that work. It's not that critical. So I just do my past the best I can. What I'm given to work with, I'll just work with that. And that's why these podcasts aren't perfect. But they're long, right? They're 2 hours long. Yeah. Now I want to do thank you, XMy24. I want to do stuff that's a little more evergreen. Like I want to tell stories about EVE Online and have some narration and then have music come in and sweep you away. Maybe have cut to, a quote or something of people talking or a video of people talking, come back to narration and go back and forth, like a good podcast can do. And I want to do that kind of stuff. When I do that, I will definitely work in a much more permanent way so that I can have that, and I would save that, right? So I have that to go to if ever I want to clean that podcast up. And that's for more evergreen stuff. Okay, so we're done here with this. All the gaps have been taken out. It's shortened it by quite a bit. You'll see usually you can see where it's shortened here. This is how much it cut off. So it was, 135, and it took out about 5 minutes. Took out all that in excess silence. Well, that's a lot of things. Sometimes the tracks, they stop recording and it goes on for 2 minutes or whatever. So here's the tightening part, and this is where you'll start to recognize it. I'm going to add the music and get it queued up and all. Been using the same music since the beginning of the show because I decided back then that I was just going to make the music. I was going to make the show and the music that I wanted to listen to. That's all really there. The song has like some sentimental value. So
really quick, let's make sure everybody's here. Gosh darn it, Jalapy.
So what you heard there, and that's kind of funny, is the recording has started and they're still getting themselves organized because I didn't cut that out because if I cut it out, I have to cut it on each track. So I forgot. When I merge it together, I need to clip off the front. Let me go back and do that. Yeah, and I marked the actual introduction here and a second introduction here because I didn't want to in front of you. So here's where he really starts the show, but I cut out the beginning of this because I didn't like it. I think he could start before that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking in Stations.
So I didn't like the hello, everyone. It seems very YouTube-y and immature. It's natural. It's what you want. It's what you do because you're talking to this empty space. So I want to start it here.
Welcome to Talking in Stations.
So I'll start there. Just clip everything before that. Move my in point, out point. Just delete. Easy enough. Go back to the multi-track now. And it shoved everything left. So it's just going to start where it starts. Give it a little more room after the come down, I call it.
Talking in Stations midweek update. This is...
That must have slipped. I want to start. Let's go back. That was a slip. And I do have to check it there because if I ruin that beginning, I have to go and capture it off the original and then paste it, and it's a bigger mess.
Welcome to... Welcome to...
Now I'll back it. It was tricky because I was cutting inside a dialogue and I zoomed all the way out and things will slip. Again, I'm facing a lot of lag. Usually my computer's super responsive, but.
Welcome to.
So now I just take all this out. Now we have a beginning. There's the beginning. Let the music fall naturally. There's things about music you can do. McLeod's really good at this too. when music is falling on a note, you can dim the note and it feels better. Like, let's listen to the music alone. You hear that? That's a real nice way to naturally go down, because you can make that note kind of fall, and then you can bring up the dialogue. And that's why I picked that spot. So we hear it again. Just kind of fall on that note. That's when the sound actually dims.
Welcome to Talking in Stations Midweek Update.
I was in a smidge early, so I'll back him up a little bit. Actually not very loud, but I can fix that.
Welcome to Talking in Stations Midweek Update.
Okay. So one thing I'll do here is I need to match the loudness. So I need to get that volume up. So I drop him into this thing called match loudness. And loudness is a whole thing that audio technicians work with. For podcasts, there's kind of a standard that people are pushing. It's not regulated anywhere. It's just kind of a, if you want to sound good on a car radio, you need to get up to -17 or -16. I use -16. I think it's the European version, -16 loofs. So I put this in here to see where it comes up, so I can see how loud it is compared to what where I need it to be. Almost done here. It's analyzing that track. Okay, so it's at -19. So I'm going to push it up just a little bit to -16. I have that all calculated down here. There's presets for this, and I just go with presets. So, and this will make sure I don't go too high. Like you'll see the nature of this change. So look at it now. I have all these filters here. I have them all turned off, so they're not at work. I'll do all my filtering if I need it. That can really ruin a good soundtrack. You see how up and down it is and sharp it is and stuff like that? Like that's going to change a bit. So when we run this, okay, so McLeod in chat is telling you that LUFs are standardized. It's a classification of loudness perception that's determined by the capacity of the ear to hear certain frequencies. And so that's, and you want to pay attention to that, because I've also heard podcasts that are too loud and I have to turn up the volume to hear it. Or sorry, too quiet. And so then when I have my volume turned up and the podcast ends, the next thing that comes on is going to be blasting. And so you want to like spare people that experience. That's killing the dynamic range. I don't think it is, because that's why you use this filter. It's not just me lowering the volume or raising the volume. That wouldn't be sufficient. This is a whole filter that takes into account all kinds of things. That's why it has different dials down here that you can't see because they're grayed out right now. It's doing a whole different pass on this that's getting it right to where it needs to be without sacrificing a lot of things. It'll sound the same. I really haven't heard it sound diminished and it's almost finished. So this is the last step. So I've taken out all the spaces, and now I'm getting the sound at about the right level. After I do this, you'll see it might clip the top of some of the trees because those things would have peaked at a, would have basically, I forget what it's called, but it would have hit your radio too loud, because see how it's increased in volume? It's still almost finished. It's almost finished. Done. It increased the volume there. It stretched everything. So when this is done, I do, sometimes I'll give it a listen, and I'll look for harshness. That's the one thing I hate about listening to podcasts, is the harshness. It makes it unlistenable. So what I'll do is if I see a lot of tree trimming at the top, then I just run a de-esser pass again, and that breaks it up. It looks like this one's going to be fine though. Yes, I meant clipping. Thank you. Yeah. So this will make it so that you don't clip. So it's kind of, it does a lot of things, and that's one of the things it does. You can see right here, it's made it so that didn't clip. You see how it's kind of cut that off? It's not a real flat cut, but it's definitely a limiter. This is a lot more there. It's a lot, see it definitely flatten that out. That's so it doesn't flip on your. Now you'll hear him come in louder.
Welcome to Talking in Stations Midweek Update. This is Season 1, Episode 17. It is currently Pi Day, if you're...
Okay, this is a little quiet here.
Just want to make sure that's on camera.
He's under talking because he's talking to himself, and that's okay. You need to save that characteristic. But there's music behind it, so I want that to read. So I'm going to pull that up a little bit.
Dino shirt. Just want to make sure that's on camera.
All right, and we also...
Okay, and so that's all I look for here, and I just want to get him through the introduction with the music and then fade it out. I only have that much to work. You can see each time it's a little bit different. So let's hear where they end up finishing the introduction.
A bit differently today. We're going to talk about two things. All right, well, let's jump right into it.
That's where he's jumping in, so I'll mark that. And I know I need to be on the way out for music here. It's a transition point, so the music's gone down too fast. This is all to taste. The reason there's a dip here is because the music goes into a staccato piano, and I think sometimes it interferes with the sound, so I lower it naturally.
Have Silver Suspiria.
Okay, I have an eagle shirt, but it's waiting for me in Toronto. My guy's bringing me it, but I have an eagle here. So.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. Also joining us today on the show on camera, for those watching, in the bottom, what is that, the right-hand corner? We have, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jalop Moliker.
All right, and so it finishes right about here.
Finally, rounding out the show tonight, we have Predator Elite from Did He Say Jump.
How's it going?
Give that. You can always fade out slower.
Tonight we have Predator Elite from Did He Say Jump.
Really no hurry to get out of the music. In fact, it's weird if you get out too fast. I like to really slowly.
We have Predator Elite from Did He Say Jump.
How's it going, everyone?
Oh, he's a little quiet. He's a guest, so he needs to. Ooh,
from Did He Say Jump.
How's it going, everyone?
All right, well, let's jump right into this.
Guy's Mike, man. Bad news, Mike. I'm going to just... fix him up. Yes, sir. Turn it down.
We have Predator Elite from Did He Say Jump.
How's it going, everyone?
All right, well, let's jump right into this one. First and foremost, we want to do things a bit...
Music's going to move into a different section. Stretching. And that's it. This is the end of the intro.
How's it going, everyone?
All right, well, let's jump right into this one. First and foremost, we want to do things a bit differently today. We're going to talk about two things, two massive things, which I'm super excited to discuss. Number one, we have Jalop on.
So that's it. I don't get out really fast on the music because I like that to lay you into the conversation. Once it goes away, it's And to get out, I match up. Just 1 second. See if anybody match up the.
I'm going to move us to public to stop the Craig recording. For this episode of Talking Stations. We'll let the ad play out with sound on to end the show. Alright, and that'll do it for. Alright, and that'll do it. Get my shill in. Watching this update. We'll let the ad play out with sound on to. Watching this update. We'll let the ad play out with sound on to end the show.
It's hard to fix that. It doesn't make sense, and so at this point, I can definitely delete
sound on. All right, and that'll do it for this episode of Talking.
It won't make a little bit of sense, but it won't. Match up the endings here.
Talking Stations.
Like to launch into the song at the end. And now I need to back into it, so I try to find a good natural spot.
As a result of this, there's going to be a lack of them, but I'll still be doing the season 1 is ending. We're going to be is going on break for 2 weeks. My shout out goes to, I should mention before the shout out. So Talking in Stations is going on break for 2 weeks.
Well, that mixed up. I can't really separate it, but I'd like to get it here. If he'd done a shout out, then made the announcements, then I could put the music under the announcements, and it makes sense. You have the branding music under the announcements, but in this case, he has a shout out in the middle of that, so we'll just have to put music behind his shout out too. Let's see.
For those watching the video, my shout out goes to, I should mention before the shout out. So Talking in Stations is going on break for 2 weeks.
That comes in too strong.
We have season 1 is ending. We're going to be transitioning over to season 2. So this is the last midweek update before we go on break. We'll have a Sunday show, and that'll be the last Sunday show before the break. That will be coming back in 2 weeks. You'll be able to find the full schedule and everything on the TIS Discord, or you can just follow our Twitch channel, check out our website, and you'll get notifications when the new shows come out.
That seems like a good.
But as a result of this, there's going to be a lack of time.
Ooh, that's tough. I think I'm going to just walk into it really. It's not a good spot to come.
Recruiting, but good job, buddy.
Fantastic. And while that ad plays for those watching the video, my shout out goes to, I should mention before the shout out. So Talking in Stations is going on break for 2 weeks. We have season 1 is ending. We're going to be transitioning over to season 2. So this is the last midweek update before we go on break. We'll have.
That's unusual. It's one of the few times I've had to do that, but we just really ease into it. And that's it. So now I can export. That's it. 2 hours later. How long is this thing? Yeah, 3 hours later. So now to done. All right. Oh my God. No time for Photoshop. I've got to get to work. There is the production of Talking in Stations midweek show. It's roughly the same as the Sunday show. And it takes 3 hours. That's about right. Sometimes it takes 4, sometimes 6. Sometimes it takes 2. Not much less than that, though. So thanks, everybody. We will. Thanks, McLeod, for chipping in with some information. He's our engineer. And if you guys have any questions, I'm always willing to answer them on Talking in Stations Discord. We will see you Sunday. Okay, take care, everyone.